Jim Rohn once said something that stopped me cold. He said, "Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better." Most people hear that and think, okay, work harder, discipline, grind. But there's a deeper question hiding inside that sentence. Better at what exactly? Not better at your job, not better at your habits, better at seeing yourself clearly. Because here's the thing Jim Rohn understood, and what Carl Jung spent his entire career proving with science. Most people are blind to who they actually are, not because they're stupid, not because they're lazy, but because the human mind has a built-in defense system that hides certain truths from you about yourself for your entire life. And today we're going to dismantle that system. By the end of this video, you'll have two tools that most people never develop. You'll know how to read someone's true character accurately, and more importantly, you'll know how to read your own. Jim Rohn said, "The challenge of leadership is to be strong but not rude, be kind but not weak, be bold but not a bully, be humble but not timid, be proud but not arrogant." Notice what he's describing. He's describing a person who has looked at every contradiction inside themselves and learned to hold them all together. That's harder than it sounds, because here's what most of us do instead. We take the parts of ourselves we don't like, the part that wants attention, the part that's jealous, the part that wants to give up, and we bury them. We tell ourselves, that's not me, I'm not like that. And then we go looking for those exact qualities in other people. And when we find them, we react with a level of emotion that doesn't quite make sense given the situation. Carl Jung had a name for this. He called it projection, and the mechanism is surprisingly simple once you see it. Whatever you've buried inside yourself, your brain doesn't delete it. It outsources it. It casts it onto other people like a projector throwing images onto a wall. And then you spend all your energy criticizing the wall instead of looking at the machine behind you. Here's a story most of us have lived in some form. Think about someone at work or in your social circle who bothers you. Not someone who wronged you. Not someone who was cruel to you. Just someone whose existence irritates you. Maybe they're loud and they love the spotlight. They always seem to be the center of attention. Maybe they're effortlessly charming and people just gravitate to them without them even trying. Maybe they promote themselves constantly. Every achievement, every win, they make sure people know about it, and it makes your skin crawl. You tell yourself they're arrogant, they're fake, they're just really good at playing the game. Now ask yourself honestly, is it possible that you want exactly what they have, and you've told yourself that wanting it makes you a bad person? That's the uncomfortable question Jung would ask. Jim Rohn believed that personal development always starts with one ruthless act of honesty. He said, you cannot change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction. But here's the thing, you can't change direction if you don't know where you're actually pointed. And a lot of people are pointed straight at their own buried desires and calling them character flaws in someone else. Here's the deeper psychology behind it. When you were young, you learned which parts of yourself were acceptable. Be quiet. Don't show off. Don't be too much. Don't be needy. Don't be angry. Don't draw attention to yourself. The lessons came from parents, teachers, peers, and you were smart, you adapted, you took those parts of yourself and locked them away. But here's what Jung spent his career proving. They didn't disappear. They went underground. And now, every time you meet someone who is loud, confident, needy, or unashamedly ambitious, your brain lights up like an alarm system. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because they're living out loud the exact part of you that you were told to silence. The stronger your reaction to someone, the closer you are to your own buried truth. This is what makes shadow projection so useful as a self-awareness tool. You don't need a therapist. You don't need years of journaling. You just need to pay attention to who bothers you and ask why. The practical exercise. The next time someone irritates you for no clear, concrete reason, pause before you judge them. Ask yourself 3 questions. 1. What specifically is bothering me about them? Name it precisely. 2. Have I ever wanted that same thing and then told myself I shouldn't want it? 3. What would it mean for me if that quality was actually acceptable? Jim Rohn built his entire philosophy around self-examination. He kept journals for decades, not to record what happened in his day, but to record his own patterns, his own reactions, his own contradictions. He understood what Jung proved through clinical research. You cannot outgrow what you refuse to see. Jim Rohn said, character isn't something you were born with and can't change. It's something you weren't born with and must take responsibility for forming. That word, forming, is the key, because character isn't what you say you are. It isn't what you plan to do when things get hard. It's what automatically comes out of you when everything goes sideways. when you didn't have time to prepare a response. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never confront. They don't actually know their own character, because they've never been watching closely enough in the moments that reveal it. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we carefully construct to show the world. And don't misunderstand, the mask isn't fake exactly. It's real. It's the professional version of you, the patient parent, the calm and collected leader who never loses composure. But maintaining that mask costs energy, constant energy, and under pressure that energy runs out fast. When someone criticizes you in front of other people, when your plan falls apart at the worst possible moment, when someone else gets the credit that you deserved, when you're exhausted and someone asks one more thing of you, the mask slips, and what comes out underneath, that's the actual data. That's who you've been building in the quiet moments of your life. 4 responses when the mask slips, and what each one reveals. 1. The attacker. They come out swinging. Immediate blame, deflection, going on the offensive before anyone can point the finger at them. What this reveals, deep insecurity wearing the costume of strength. They've learned that the best defense is a preemptive strike. 2. The disappearer. They go quiet, withdraw completely, shut down the conversation by removing themselves from it. What this reveals, somewhere in their past, conflict became associated with danger. Disappearing felt safer than engaging. 3. The deflector. They immediately point somewhere else. It wasn't my fault. It was the team, the timing, the market, the circumstances. What this reveals, an identity so fragile that it cannot absorb responsibility without cracking. They need the problem to belong to someone else. 4. The pauser. They stop. Take a breath. Don't react immediately. Respond instead of react. What this reveals, someone who has done real internal work. Someone who has been in enough fires to know that the first reaction isn't always the right one. Rohn said, maturity is the ability to reap without apology and not complain when things don't go well. That's the pauser. That's what genuine psychological development looks like when the pressure is actually on. Here's something crucial that Jung discovered, and most people miss. You don't need a major crisis to see someone's true character. You just need small friction, everyday friction. Watch what happens when their phone dies and they can't check social media for an hour. The waiter gets their order wrong. Someone doesn't laugh at their joke. They're kept waiting 20 minutes when they expected 5. Their idea gets questioned in a meeting. These tiny moments of discomfort, they're like small cracks in a wall. The crack itself isn't dramatic, but if you look through it, you can see the entire structure underneath. Rohn kept coming back to one idea that everyone quotes but fewer people truly apply. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But how do you actually evaluate people before you've invested years in them? You don't wait for a crisis. You watch how they handle the small annoyances. Because small annoyances happen every single day. And every day is a character test, whether people realize they're being tested or not. Let me share something personal here. I once had a colleague whose presence alone made me tense up. Every time he walked into a room, I noticed something shift in me, a low-grade irritation I genuinely couldn't explain. Nothing he did was objectively wrong. He was actually quite successful. And that, I eventually realized, was exactly the problem. For months I told myself I just didn't respect his methods. He was too self-promotional, too focused on his image, too comfortable making sure people knew what he'd accomplished. I had convinced myself this was a principled position. Then one evening I was reading Rohn, and this line hit me like cold water. If you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan. And guess what they have planned for you? Not much. I sat with that for a long time, because the honest answer, the one I had been carefully avoiding for months, was that this colleague was doing exactly what I was afraid to do. He was designing his own plan, out loud, unapologetically, without waiting for permission. And I had spent years quietly believing that needing recognition was something to be ashamed of. So I turned it into a character flaw in him, instead of facing it as an unmet need in myself. Jung called this the mirror effect. And it works in 2 directions, not just one. The negative mirror, when you judge someone harshly with that particular sharp personal irritation, you're often looking at a quality you've buried in yourself. You call it a flaw in them because you can't acknowledge it as a need in yourself. The positive mirror, when you put someone on a pedestal, when you say they're just so naturally confident, so effortlessly creative, I could never be like that, you're often projecting your own unlived potential onto them. The qualities you most admire in others are frequently the qualities you already possess but haven't given yourself permission to express. Both mirrors are pointing at the same thing, you. Rohn said, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Most people interpret that as read more books, develop more skills, build better habits, and yes, all of that. But the deeper layer is this. Your reactions to other people are one of the richest sources of self-knowledge you will ever have access to. Not just something to manage or push past. Actual data, a real signal about what's unresolved inside you. Every person who triggers a strong reaction, positive or negative, is handing you a piece of information about yourself that you haven't fully processed yet. The question is whether you use it. The shift in practice. Most people, when they feel irritated by someone, ask, what's wrong with them? The more useful question, the one that actually leads somewhere, is what is my reaction to them telling me about me? This doesn't mean the other person has no flaws. They might have plenty. But your level of emotional charge around their flaws, that part is yours. That charge is the compass needle pointing back at your own unfinished work. And when you start treating it that way, not as a problem to suppress but as information to use, every difficult person in your life becomes something different. Not a burden, not an enemy, a teacher, one of the most accurate teachers you'll ever encounter. Rohn said, the few who do are the envy of the many who only watch. But before someone can do, they have to see. And here's what Jung observed after decades of working directly with people. When you hold up a mirror to someone, when you gently, honestly reflect back a pattern they can't see in themselves, their response in the next 10 seconds tells you almost everything about their capacity for real growth. Not their intelligence, not their work ethic, their capacity for growth. There are exactly 3 types. Type 1, the frozen. You reflect something back to them, a pattern, a blind spot, something consistent in how they behave, and they immediately harden. That's not me. You clearly don't understand the situation. You're reading it wrong. The walls go up. The conversation effectively ends. Now, this isn't simple stubbornness. It's not just an ego problem. This is a person whose entire sense of identity has been built around a particular self-image. And that self-image is so tightly constructed that any challenge to it feels less like feedback and more like a threat to their survival. Jung called this state unconscious, not unintelligent, not without talent, but psychologically defended against self-knowledge in a way that makes genuine growth nearly impossible until something breaks the defense open. Rohn had compassion for these people, but he was honest about the limits of what anyone else can do. You can't hire someone to do your push-ups for you. You cannot force growth on someone who isn't ready to receive it. No insight delivered from the outside will reach a person whose inside is locked down tight. The door opens from the inside. Type 2, the nodder, they hear you. They actually agree. Yeah, you're right. I do that. I've noticed it too. I really need to work on it. Genuine acknowledgement, real intellectual understanding. They're not defensive, they're receptive. And then, 2 weeks later, the exact same pattern plays out again. Identical. This isn't laziness. It's not that they didn't mean what they said. This is a person who has developed self-awareness as a concept, but hasn't yet found the bridge between knowing and changing. They understand with their head. The understanding just hasn't reached their hands yet, or their automatic responses, or the moments when it actually counts. Rohn described this gap perfectly. Motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. The nodder is permanently stuck between those two things. They can see the gap clearly, but seeing the gap and crossing it are two completely different skills. This is actually the most common type, and it's worth saying, it's not a failure. It's a stage. The question is simply, how long do you stay in it? Type 3, the integrator. Something you say actually lands. They go quiet for a moment, not the defensive silence of type 1, but a genuinely thoughtful pause. You can see them sitting with it, and then they say something that surprises you. Not a rehearsed agreement, not a defense, an actual new thought they just arrived at right there in front of you. I never connected those two things before. But you're right, when I do X, I think I'm probably trying to protect myself from feeling Y. That's integration. That's a person whose sense of self is secure enough to absorb new and uncomfortable information without shattering, strong enough to be flexible. Jung called these people individuated, not perfect, not free of their shadow, but genuinely awake to their own patterns. Able to hold a mirror without flinching away from it. Rohn said, don't just read the easy stuff. You may be entertained by it, but you will never grow from it. The integrator applies that same standard to their inner life. They don't just absorb the comfortable truths about themselves. They actively go looking for the uncomfortable ones because they've learned through experience that discomfort is precisely where growth lives. The honest question, which type are you? And be careful here, because the answer almost certainly isn't the same across all areas of your life. You might be a genuine integrator when it comes to your professional performance, open to feedback, quick to adjust, always improving, and completely frozen when it comes to a particular relationship pattern you've carried for 20 years. You might be a nodder about your health. You understand exactly what you should be doing. You've understood it for years. You just haven't done it yet. The point isn't to judge which type you are. The point is to see it clearly in each specific area so you can make a conscious choice about it. That's the whole game Rohn was pointing at. That's what Jung spent his life studying. Seeing clearly, then choosing. We need to talk about something most videos like this one will skip over, because by this point you have real tools. You understand shadow projection. You can recognize persona breakdowns. You know the 3 types and how to spot them. And there's a version of you right now, I may be already thinking, I know someone exactly like type 1. I know someone who does that shadow projection thing all the time and never sees it. That feeling, that I finally see them clearly feeling, is exactly where things start to go wrong. Rohn said something I find myself returning to often. Learn to be happy with what you have while you pursue all that you want. The psychological equivalent of that is, learn to be honest about who you are while you work toward who you want to become. Not, learn to analyze everyone around you while remaining perfectly blind to yourself. Jung watched this happen repeatedly. People would discover psychology, genuinely fall in love with the ideas, and then quietly begin using it as a weapon. He called them shadow hunters. People who use psychological knowledge to feel superior, to expose others' vulnerabilities, to stay one step ahead in every interaction. And he noticed something consistently true about these people. The more obsessively they analyzed others, the less they examined themselves. The psychology had become a sophisticated avoidance strategy, a way to feel self-aware without doing any actual self-work. They were using insight about other people to avoid the harder, more important work of insight about themselves. The 4 warning signs you're going down this road. 1. You feel a private satisfaction when you figure someone out. That feeling is your ego getting a hit. It has nothing to do with genuine understanding, and everything to do with feeling one level above someone else. 2. You start using what you observe to gain advantage over people. At that point, you're not reading people anymore. You're hunting them. 3. You're becoming more judgmental, not less. This is the clearest indicator. Real psychological understanding, when it's working properly, always increases compassion. Always. Because the deeper you understand human behavior, the more you see how much of it is driven by pain, fear, and old wounds. If understanding people is making you more contemptuous, something has gone wrong. 4. You're analyzing everyone around you but never turning the same lens on yourself. The tool is only working in one direction, and a one-directional tool isn't self-awareness. It's just a different kind of blindness. Rohn said, happiness is not something you postpone for the future, it is something you design for the present. Genuine self-knowledge works exactly the same way. It isn't something you accumulate by studying other people and saving it for later. It's something you build by applying every insight, first and most honestly, to yourself. Right now, in this moment. The right way to use everything from this video. When you notice someone projecting their shadow onto others, don't expose them. Turn it around. Ask yourself, where do I do this exact thing? When you watch someone's mask crack under pressure, don't catalog it as data on them. Ask yourself, what does my own mask crack reveal when I'm under pressure? When you identify someone as a type 1, 2, or 3, don't use it to dismiss them or feel ahead of them. Use it to understand how to actually reach them, how to communicate in a way that works for how they're built. Every observation you make about someone else, if you're doing this right, should eventually loop back to a genuine question about yourself. That's the architecture of everything Jung built. That's the quiet, consistent thread running through everything Rohn taught. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. Not better at reading other people, better at reading yourself. Honestly, without flinching. That's the work. And it never fully ends. So here's what we covered today. Chapter 1. The people who irritate you most are often showing you the parts of yourself you've refused to claim. Shadow projection isn't a flaw, it's a map. Learn to read it. Chapter 2. You don't see someone's real character when everything is going well. You see it in the pressure moments. Watch the small cracks, they reveal more than the big breaks. Chapter 3. Everyone who triggers a strong reaction in you, positive or negative, is a mirror. Your job isn't to fix what you see in the mirror. Your job is to understand what it's telling you. Chapter 4. 3 types of people when confronted with truth about themselves: the frozen, the nodder, and the integrator. You're probably all 3 in different areas of your life. The goal is to see which is which. Chapter 5. This knowledge is a tool. Tools can build things. Tools can destroy things. The difference comes down to whether you're pointing it outward to judge or inward to grow. Rohn said, take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live. I'd add one thing: take care of your mind. Not just the polished surface of it, the part you show people, the parts underneath, the buried desires, the old defenses, the shadow, because that's where your real work is, and that's where your real growth has been waiting all along. If this gave you something useful, the next video goes deeper. We'll explore what Rohn called the set of the sail, and what Jung discovered about why 2 people can face the exact same storm and arrive at completely different places. See you there.